The federal courtroom buzzed with controlled tension until Judge Harrison's composure finally cracked. "Unseal the classified exhibit, Bailiff Chun," he commanded, uncertainty clear in his voice. The unremarkable woman in the public gallery sat quietly in the back row while a government document was opened and revealed one detail that changed everything. The effect was immediate. The prosecutor's briefcase slipped from his hands, hitting the marble floor. Senior attorneys froze at their counsel tables and faces drained of color throughout the chamber. No one had expected a classified document to name her. No one had expected the quiet woman observing from the gallery to be connected to a case spanning decades. No one had expected the truth. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story captivated you, please consider subscribing. We share powerful stories of unsung heroes every week. The federal courthouse hummed with the constant buzz of legal proceedings and hushed conversations. Banks of fluorescent lights cast stark illumination across focused faces, highlighting legal briefs dotted with red confidential stamps and blue government seals. The air carried the scent of old leather and paper, mixed with the tension that came with monitoring classified legal proceedings. It was 1,000 hours on what had begun as a standard morning session at the Eastern District Federal Court, housed in the imposing granite building in downtown Washington. Civilian third-class Rebecca Torres sat at her assigned observation seat, deliberately unremarkable in her simple business attire and plain shoulder bag. Her black hair was pulled back in a conservative style, no visible identification except for a visitor pass. Late 20s, with an intelligent face that spoke of education rather than legal training. Her dark eyes moved constantly between court proceedings and legal documents, while her presence demanded nothing from the formality around her. To a casual observer, she might have been any citizen, a recent journalism graduate perhaps, or another face in the endless stream of court observers. She occasionally made notes in a standard notebook, her handwriting neat and precise. Unlike the attorneys and court officials who filled the courtroom with their bar credentials and legal experience, she wore no visible markers of legal training or professional standing. Just a civilian, it seemed, with public access and an interest in observing federal proceedings. The case underway involved a complex national security trial against Dr. Marcus Kellerman, accused of selling classified research to foreign governments. The trial had progressed through standard phases: opening statements, witness examination, and now evidence presentation, with classified documents requiring judicial review. Lead Prosecutor Williams, a veteran federal attorney with something to prove, coordinated the evidence presentation with practiced efficiency, moving between counsel tables and checking status displays throughout the courtroom. Dr. Kellerman had established patterns of behavior that indicated clear intent to commit espionage. Williams explained to the jury, his voice carrying across the chamber. His decision to access classified materials beyond his clearance level created clear evidence of criminal intent. Judge Harrison sat elevated at the judicial bench, his face a careful mask. A distinguished federal judge with 22 years on the bench, he looked somehow troubled in his black robes, as if the weight of the national security case had physically aged him in recent weeks. Rebecca watched it all, her expression revealing nothing. Only the occasional glance toward the classified evidence table suggested any emotional response to the ongoing proceedings. When the court clerk called for an evidence review, heads turned in mild surprise as Rebecca shifted slightly in her observation seat. "Ms. Torres has been monitoring the proceedings," lead prosecutor Williams noted to the court reporter. "She appears to be taking detailed observations of the case." She remained seated in the public gallery with a deliberate stillness that seemed at odds with her civilian status. Something about her bearing, spine straight, posture measured, attention focused, caught the notice of a gray-haired court officer seated near the main entrance. He frowned slightly, studying her with newfound interest. Judge Harrison, sharp-eyed and methodical, observed her with narrowed attention as court proceedings continued. The judge was known for his no-nonsense approach to federal cases and courtroom protocol. Today, he wore his authority like a burden, his judicial robes crisp despite the morning hour. "The court will proceed with classified evidence review," instructed Judge Harrison. The proceedings continued with Rebecca Torres observing from the gallery, her attention unwavering. Defense attorney Martinez began his cross-examination, and Rebecca's focus was complete and precise, but maintained with such measured, quiet observation that Judge Harrison occasionally glanced in her direction. Several times, court personnel noticed her intense concentration on specific testimony. The court proceedings moved through standard phases: witness examination, evidence presentation, and legal arguments. Defense attorney Martinez questioned the government's evidence chain and challenged the classified material handling procedures. Ms. Torres, Judge Harrison finally noted from the bench, "You've been observing these proceedings with unusual attention to detail. Do you have professional interest in this case?" "No, Your Honor," Rebecca responded, her voice soft but clear. Defense attorney Martinez continued his examination. "Dr. Kellerman, can you explain your authorized access to the classified research materials in question?" "I had appropriate clearance levels for my assigned research projects," the defendant replied. "The materials I accessed were within my authorized scope of work as outlined in my security briefing." "And what were your findings during your research?" "I determined that the research contained significant inconsistencies that weren't reflected in published scientific assessments. I also noted substantial variations in experimental data that indicated potential security concerns." "Did you document these observations?" "Yes, I logged all discrepancies and attempted verification through available research databases." "Was this analysis reviewed by security personnel?" "It was not forwarded beyond my immediate research supervisor." The prosecuting attorney, Assistant U.S. Attorney Patricia Voss, approached for redirect examination with a skeptical demeanor. Tall and imposing with silver hair that lent her an air of authority, she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to challenging questionable testimony. "Dr. Kellerman, what specific authorization qualified you to access materials beyond your original clearance level?" "I completed additional security training during my research assignment." "And what level of access?" Her tone suggested the answer would confirm Kellerman's guilt. "I maintained appropriate clearance levels for expanded research responsibilities," Dr. Kellerman responded evenly. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss smiled thinly. "Dr. Kellerman, how could you possibly justify accessing classified materials beyond your authorized scope when you knew such access violated federal security protocols?" Something flickered across Judge Harrison's face. A brief shadow of recognition quickly suppressed. He studied Rebecca more intently now from the bench. "Objection to argumentative questioning," Defense Attorney Martinez called out. "Dr. Kellerman's access should be evaluated based on documented authorization." "Sustained," Judge Harrison replied, his eyes never leaving Rebecca. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss adjusted her approach. "Let me rephrase. What specific authorization do you claim justified your access to materials classified above your original clearance level?" Dr. Kellerman paused before answering, his eyes briefly meeting those of the gray-haired court officer near the main entrance. "My research responsibilities included expanded access based on project requirements," he said carefully. "Could you be more specific?" "That information involves classified projects that may not be relevant to current charges." Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss looked to the judge. "Your Honor, if the defendant cannot specify his authorization for accessing classified materials, his claims of legitimate access should be considered accordingly." "I'll allow the line of questioning," Judge Harrison ruled. "Dr. Kellerman, please provide more detail about your claimed authorization." Dr. Kellerman's expression remained neutral. "My expanded access involved classified research programs authorized by government oversight." "How convenient," Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss remarked dryly. "So we're expected to accept your access to classified materials without knowing your actual authorization to review such information?" "I was operating within research protocols established by my supervisors." As the questioning continued, Dr. Kellerman responded with increasingly precise details about research methodologies, security protocols, and classification procedures that made several court observers exchange glances. He referenced specific research programs, security configurations, and oversight measures that seemed beyond the scope of his original assignment. When shown classified research documents, his eyes lingered on them a moment longer than necessary, his composure wavering almost imperceptibly before returning to professional detachment. "Do you recognize these classified materials, Dr. Kellerman?" Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss asked. "Yes, they represent research documents I accessed during my authorized project work." And your analysis of these materials proved to be, what exactly? The research you claim was authorized. How does that justify accessing materials beyond your clearance level? Dr. Kellerman's voice remained steady. The research inconsistencies I identified indicated classified information that wasn't reflected in current security assessments. My recommendation for enhanced review procedures was documented in my research reports. In the courtroom gallery, the older court officer with gray hair and Federal Service ribbons watched Rebecca with growing intensity, his brow furrowed in concentration as if trying to place a half-remembered face from government files. The morning hours passed as Defense Attorney Martinez returned for follow-up questions, asking Dr. Kellerman about specific research requirements for the classified project. Can you explain the standard protocols for a research verification project of this nature? Martinez asked. The research team would have established primary and secondary access permissions with security oversight, Dr. Kellerman explained. Standard protocol requires verified identification and clearance confirmation at predetermined security levels. And if those authorizations were insufficient or questioned, the backup verification would proceed using alternative authentication methods after primary credentials were assessed, utilizing specialized clearance protocols on confirmed security systems. He explained with a level of technical precision that raised eyebrows among the legal staff present. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his judicial demeanor showing signs of strain. Dr. Kellerman, the court requires clear testimony regarding your authorization for accessing classified materials. Yes, Your Honor, Dr. Kellerman replied. The older court officer in the gallery now sat forward in his position, his eyes never leaving Rebecca's face. Recognition seemed to be dawning slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity to something closer to alarm. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss seized on the judge's concern. Perhaps Dr. Kellerman's vague responses reflect his awareness that his access was unauthorized and criminal. Defense Attorney Martinez stood immediately. Your Honor, that's inappropriate characterization. Noted, Counselor, Judge Harrison replied sharply. Ms. Voss, confine your remarks to relevant examination. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss nodded in acknowledgement. Dr. Kellerman, in your assessment as a research scientist, was there anything about the classified materials you accessed that justified exceeding your authorized clearance level? Dr. Kellerman looked directly at the evidence table for the first time. The research assessment suggested security implications beyond current oversight estimates. That wasn't my question. Based on what you discovered, should your access protocols have been modified through proper channels? Based on the research discrepancies I identified, yes. But my assessment was not included in security review processes. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss's expression hardened. Are you suggesting that security information was deliberately ignored by oversight personnel? I'm stating that the research analysis I provided differed significantly from the security assessment that was distributed to project personnel. The courtroom stirred with murmurs. Judge Harrison tapped his gavel once, restoring order. Dr. Kellerman, Judge Harrison said, his voice tight with growing concern. You'll need to explain that assertion clearly for the court record. What specifically was different about your analysis? Dr. Kellerman paused, his eyes scanning the courtroom briefly before returning to the judge. When he spoke, his voice remained measured, but his words carried new weight. My research analysis indicated that the classified materials contained security protocols using documentation normally reserved for foreign intelligence operations. That information was not included in the oversight briefing provided to research personnel. Judge Harrison's composure cracked for the first time. The gray-haired court officer's expression darkened as he studied Rebecca with new intensity. Dr. Kellerman, Judge Harrison said firmly, judicial authority evident in his tone. The court requires complete clarity regarding these classified materials and your access to them. Rebecca looked directly at Judge Harrison from the gallery. A look of quiet recognition passed between them, though the judge quickly masked it with professional detachment. The veteran court officer was now gripping his position, his knuckles white. Judge Harrison finally spoke with visible judicial strain, leaning forward at his bench. The court will proceed with examination of the classified evidence to determine the scope of this case. The courtroom fell silent. For the first time since the proceedings began, Rebecca looked directly at Judge Harrison. A look of quiet recognition passed between them, though the judge quickly masked it. The gray-haired court officer near the gallery entrance leaned forward, his hands gripping his position. Suddenly, the court clerk approached the bench with an urgent classified document that had just been unsealed by government order. The document was brief, heavily redacted, but contained one name that changed everything. Judge Harrison read the document, his face growing pale, then looked directly at Rebecca in the gallery. "The court will recess for 15 minutes, Judge Harrison announced, his voice unsteady. "When we reconvene, the court requires testimony from Ms. Rebecca Torres, currently observing from the gallery." The effect was immediate and electric. Lead Prosecutor Williams's briefcase fell from his hands, legal papers scattering across the marble floor. Several attorneys physically straightened at their tables as if receiving urgent news. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss's face drained of color. The gray-haired court officer near the gallery entrance stood up involuntarily, then slowly sat back down. Complete silence fell over the courtroom as recognition dawned across various faces. Some looked confused, others shocked, and a few, those who understood the significance of what they had just heard, appeared stricken. Rebecca continued in her normal soft voice, but now everyone was straining to hear. "That classified document contains my real name because I was the intelligence analyst attached to Project Blackwater 5 years ago. I was also the sole survivor of Operation Silent Protocol, which Judge Harrison personally reviewed in classified hearings 4 years before Dr. Kellerman's research began." She methodically produced a worn, waterproof document case from her shoulder bag and held it up for the court to see. "This contains classified case files from Operation Silent Protocol, not the sanitized reports filed with federal oversight. Dr. Kellerman isn't guilty of espionage. He discovered the same foreign intelligence infiltration that destroyed my team when we tried to expose it." Judge Harrison attempted to maintain judicial order, but found his voice failing him. "Ms. Torres, this is highly irregular procedure for federal court proceedings. My team and I were declared killed in a training accident during Operation Silent Protocol," Rebecca continued calmly. "I was the only survivor. I've spent 4 years working under assumed identity and waiting for another case to intersect with the same intelligence network, not for personal reasons, but to prevent other Americans from being falsely accused of crimes they didn't commit." A younger court reporter near the stenography station looked up in confusion. "This is impossible. Intelligence analyst Torres died in a classified training incident. I processed federal documentation myself." The gray-haired court officer turned to address the courtroom. Everyone remained seated. He said quietly, "Look at that classified document. Federal intelligence files don't contain names without cause." Rebecca opened her document case to reveal classified files, security clearances, and federal documentation. "My team was eliminated because we discovered Deputy Director Sarah Kane was facilitating intelligence transfers to foreign operatives through a network of compromised research scientists, the same network that provided the false evidence leading to Dr. Kellerman's arrest." The courtroom erupted into controlled chaos. Judge Harrison tapped his gavel repeatedly, finally restoring some semblance of order. His face had lost all color, and his hand trembled visibly. "This court will recess for 30 minutes, he declared, his voice unsteady. But before anyone could move, Rebecca spoke again. "With respect, Your Honor, Dr. Kellerman has been in federal custody for 8 months based on fabricated evidence. I've waited 4 years to speak, but he doesn't have time for extended legal procedures." Judge Harrison slowly leaned back in his chair, his judicial authority visibly shaken. He nodded once, a gesture of reluctant permission. "Operation Silent Protocol was classified above top secret," Rebecca continued. "Our mission was to identify the source of American intelligence appearing in foreign operations across Eastern Europe. We traced the intelligence to a distribution network operating from a facility near Langley. What we found there was a sophisticated infiltration operation with communication records linking directly to Deputy Director Kane and her foreign contacts." She turned her document case and removed an encrypted data chip. "This contains communication intercepts, financial transfers, and operational records. We transmitted this intelligence before we were compromised. That transmission was intercepted and our extraction was canceled. Our team was left to die." Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss stood, her voice hollow. "I received direct confirmation from Deputy Director Kane that Silent Protocol team had been confirmed Kia. The operation was terminated due to training accident circumstances. We weren't dead, Rebecca said simply. We were very much alive and calling for immediate extraction. I heard your voice on the federal frequency, Ms. Voss. You sounded confused, but you relayed the termination order. Defense attorney Martinez approached Rebecca cautiously. Intelligence analyst Torres, if what you're saying is true, how did you survive? And why assume a false identity for 4 years? Rebecca's composure never wavered. I survived because I was separated from my team during the final assault on our position. I was wounded, unconscious, presumed dead along with the others. Civilian contractors found me and kept me hidden while I recovered. By the time I was functional again, the official story was established. My team was dead, the operation had never existed, and Deputy Director Kane had been promoted to oversight of counterintelligence. She looked around the courtroom, meeting the eyes of several legal professionals. I needed time to gather evidence that couldn't be easily buried again. I needed to understand who knew about the intelligence infiltration and who was simply following compromised orders. Most importantly, I needed to make sure no other Americans would be falsely prosecuted because of the same corruption. The gray-haired court officer approached the witness area. Your Honor, request permission to address the court. I am Agent Marcus Webb, retired Federal Bureau of Investigation. I was the case officer for the Silent Protocol team. He turned to face Rebecca. Intelligence analyst Torres was one of the finest operatives I ever worked with. If she says her team was betrayed, I believe her without question. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss interjected. This is all highly dramatic, but it has no direct bearing on current criminal charges. Dr. Kellerman accessed classified materials in violation of federal law, not some conspiracy from years ago. They're connected, Rebecca replied. Dr. Kellerman's research brought him too close to the same intelligence infiltration network. His arrest was orchestrated to silence him before he could expose the ongoing foreign operation. History repeating itself. Different case, same betrayal, same source. She pulled another document from her case. This is a research summary showing that Dr. Kellerman reported security discrepancies directly to Deputy Director Kane 3 times before his arrest. He was told explicitly that pursuing the security investigation would compromise critical operations. He wasn't careless. He was set up. Judge Harrison studied the document, his judicial demeanor cracking further. These intelligence reports weren't included in the federal briefing I received for this case. Because they were deliberately removed, Rebecca said, just like the intelligence I provided was removed from federal assessments. And just like the evidence was removed from Operation Silent Protocol after my team was eliminated. The courtroom had grown absolutely still. Every person present was aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. Even the court reporters had stopped their routine documentation, staring at Rebecca with undisguised astonishment. Defense attorney Martinez approached the bench. Your Honor, in light of this new evidence, I request immediate review of all charges against Dr. Kellerman and potentially dismissal pending investigation of prosecutorial misconduct. Judge Harrison nodded absently, his attention still fixed on Rebecca. Granted, all criminal proceedings will be suspended immediately pending federal investigation. He paused, then added, Intelligence analyst Torres will remain under federal protection until these matters are resolved. As court staff began coordinating the legal changes, Rebecca spoke again. There's something else you should know, Your Honor. She removed a final document from her case. This is the original federal authorization for Operation Silent Protocol with your signature from the classified review. And this, she produced another paper, is the termination order that condemned my team. The authorizing signatures don't match. Judge Harrison took both documents with trembling hands. Someone forged my signature on the termination order, he whispered, shock evident in his voice. Yes, Rebecca confirmed. You've been carrying responsibility for a decision you never made. The termination order came directly from Deputy Director Kane's office. The retired Agent Webb moved closer. I always questioned why you would authorize terminating that operation, Harrison. It didn't align with anything I knew about your judicial philosophy. Judge Harrison looked up, visible emotion crossing his face. I've spent 4 years believing I made a decision that got 5 good intelligence officers killed. I authorized the operation review, but I never authorized abandoning them to die. The doors to the courtroom opened, and a team of federal investigators entered, led by a stern-faced senior agent. What is the meaning of this judicial alert? The agent demanded. Judge Harrison, I'm Agent Patricia Foster from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We received an anonymous intelligence package yesterday containing evidence of serious breaches of federal law involving Deputy Director Kane and foreign intelligence operations. I understand there may be connected evidence being presented in this courtroom. Rebecca smiled faintly. Right on schedule, she murmured. Agent Foster approached her. You would be intelligence analyst Torres, formerly of Silent Protocol. I would be. We have extensive questions for you, analyst. Starting with how you survived and why you assumed false identity. And I have answers, Agent Foster. For years' worth. The agent turned to address Judge Harrison. With your permission, I'd like to take custody of the evidence intelligence analyst Torres has provided and arrange for her protection pending a full investigation. Judge Harrison nodded. Granted, but I want to be kept fully informed of any evidence relating to Dr. Kellerman's case and potential prosecutorial misconduct. Of course, Your Honor. It appears several current federal cases have been compromised by the same source. The courtroom began to clear of non-essential personnel, but Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss remained at her counsel table, looking shell-shocked. Rebecca approached her quietly. I don't understand, Voss said, looking up at her. Why would you risk exposure? I'm the one who relayed the termination order that left your team to die. Because you were another victim of the same corruption, Rebecca replied simply. You followed what you believed were legitimate federal orders from a trusted superior. The responsibility should rest with those who manipulated you, not those who were deceived. How can you be so certain I wasn't involved? Rebecca allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Because I've spent 4 years studying every detail of what happened. I know who gave the orders and why. I know who altered federal records and who profited from the intelligence sales. Most importantly, I know. You requested confirmation twice because you suspected something was wrong with the termination order. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss's eyes widened. How could you possibly know that? Those communications were classified. I had help, Rebecca admitted. Not everyone in the federal system was compromised. There are still good people within the government who wanted the truth to come out, and who wanted to prevent other Americans from being falsely prosecuted because of corruption. As she prepared to leave with Agent Foster, the retired Agent Webb approached. Intelligence analyst, he said formally, then dropped his voice. Rebecca, we held a memorial service. I spoke about your dedication to the mission and to protecting American interests. I know, she replied quietly. I read the federal transcript online. Thank you for honoring our sacrifice. What happens to Dr. Kellerman now? Rebecca looked at the federal displays showing current courthouse operations. Now he receives a fair trial with honest evidence and proper legal representation. Justice can function correctly because someone finally told the truth. The courtroom remained suspended in a moment of shocked revelation. Judge Harrison slowly stood from his bench and removed his judicial robes, setting them carefully before stepping down to stand on the same level as Rebecca. This court recognizes intelligence analyst Rebecca Torres, presumed killed in action, recipient of the Intelligence Star and Federal Service Medal, he announced formally, his voice carrying a weight of regret and respect. The retired Agent Webb approached Rebecca and rendered a respectful acknowledgement. Others throughout the courtroom followed suit, a ripple of silent recognition spreading through the chamber. Legal personnel who had moments ago regarded her with curiosity now stood in acknowledgement, honoring a fallen operative returned from the dead. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss, visibly shaken, stood to address Rebecca directly. I never knew who actually gave that termination order. I've been carrying this responsibility for 4 years, believing I contributed to your team's death. I know, Rebecca replied. Your voice on the federal frequency that day. I heard your uncertainty. You questioned the order. Twice, Voss confirmed, her voice breaking slightly. They told me I was risking additional lives by questioning operational decisions, that the intelligence had confirmed the entire team had been eliminated in the training incident. Judge Harrison's professional demeanor cracked as he turned to face the court staff. I authorized Operation Silent Protocol review based on intelligence infiltration evidence that indicated a high-priority threat. I did not authorize the termination order that came later. The signature was forged. You've been living with responsibility that was never yours to bear, Rebecca confirmed. Deputy Director Kane used your judicial authority to cover her own criminal activities. Agent Foster stepped forward. Judge Harrison, I'd like to request a formal suspension of current federal proceedings while we secure this evidence and establish proper protocols for what happens next. This has implications for multiple ongoing cases and potentially dozens of federal personnel. Judge Harrison nodded. Current proceedings will be suspended with enhanced security protocols, but all federal evidence will be immediately reviewed for potential compromise. He paused. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss, in light of the evidence presented, you are relieved of any responsibility for the silent protocol incident pending complete review of the circumstances. As federal investigators began securing the courtroom and escorting people to debriefing areas, Rebecca opened her document case and carefully displayed photographs showing Deputy Director Kane meeting with known foreign operatives and intelligence contacts. This was never about vindication, she said softly, addressing the courtroom at large. It was about preventing other Americans from being falsely prosecuted because of corruption and about making sure the justice system can function with honest evidence rather than foreign manipulation. As she descended from the witness area, her shadow stretched long behind her across the courtroom floor, the shadow of an intelligence officer standing at attention rather than a civilian observer in the gallery. For a moment, she paused to look back at the federal displays showing current courthouse operations. The legal staff was coordinating with proper information for the first time in years. Judge Harrison was directing proceedings with restored confidence in his federal systems. Assistant U.S. Attorney Voss was working to identify other potentially compromised cases. Agent Webb watched her from near the judicial bench, his face reflecting a complex mix of pride and determination. Rebecca gave him a small nod before continuing toward the exit with Agent Foster. Her mission wasn't quite complete. There would be extensive debriefings, federal investigations, and probably congressional oversight. The full scope of the infiltration would need to be exposed, and those responsible held accountable at every level. But the most important part was accomplished. The truth was out, and Americans could once again trust that their justice system was working to protect them rather than serve foreign interests. As she reached the courtroom exit, a federal marshal approached. Intelligence Analyst Torres, Agent Foster has arranged secure transportation for your continued protection. If you'll come this way. She followed the marshal toward the exit, conscious of the eyes following her progress. Court staff, legal professionals, federal personnel. For 4 years, she had lived invisibly, unremarkable and unnoticed, gathering evidence while pretending to be someone else. Now she walked openly, her identity reclaimed, her purpose fulfilled. The older veteran caught up with her just before she reached the exit corridor. Intelligence analyst, he said quietly. What you did, surviving, maintaining your cover, gathering evidence, coming forward at the right moment, it was extraordinary. I had a duty to my team and to the Americans who came after us, she replied simply. It was more than duty, he insisted. It was courage of the highest order, and intelligence work of a quality that saved lives. Rebecca allowed herself a small smile. You taught us well, Agent Webb. I taught you procedures and protocols, he corrected. What you demonstrated today, that came from within. He watched her leave with the investigative team, then turned to Judge Harrison, who had joined them. Some heroes never get the recognition they deserve, he said quietly. They just carry the weight of protecting others. Judge Harrison nodded, watching Rebecca's figure disappear down the corridor. And some truths are worth waiting years to hear. The morning light continued to strengthen as Rebecca's escort vehicle pulled away from the federal courthouse. Behind her, the courtroom buzzed with renewed purpose as federal proceedings moved forward with proper evidence verification and adequate legal safeguards. The legal staff worked with restored confidence, knowing their cases would proceed without foreign interference. Ahead lay the challenge of ensuring complete justice was served and that the full scope of the intelligence infiltration was exposed and dismantled. But for now, in this moment between what was hidden and what would be revealed, the simple act of speaking truth had transformed a routine criminal trial into something profound. The power of one intelligence officer's quiet determination to honor fallen comrades and protect those who came after, even when it meant sacrificing years of her own life, to gather the evidence necessary to expose a betrayal that powerful forces had tried to bury forever. As her vehicle reached the courthouse steps, Rebecca's radio crackled with an update from the federal investigators. All charges against Dr. Kellerman have been dismissed. Investigation proceeding with full federal oversight. Rebecca closed her eyes and smiled for the first time in 4 years, knowing that this time, justice would be served with honest evidence rather than foreign deception.